this. So I've been giving talks to people with Parkinson's disease for more than 10 years now, and invariably the directive was to talk around the medications, what we had available now, what they might do for you, and what cure or what potential cure was coming down the road. And it was a very dry topic. I think where we're at now in terms of discussing Parkinson's disease and how it affects you is a much better place to be in, because it allows each of us actually get the best out of the condition and the treatments we have available to us. So thank you very much for that. You've seen this once or twice, and I don't apologize for robbing it and using it in a lot of the talks that I use for doctors, both GPs and hospital-based doctors, and also nurses, both in the hospital centre, in GP practices, and out in the nursing homes, because I think it very nicely encapsulates a platform and a strategy for helping you get the best out of yourself when you have Parkinson's disease. And Claire spoke about some of this earlier on, and I'm not going to allude to 4 of the 5 elements here. I'm mainly going to stick with medication. But I suppose what I would say is that the important bit is the ring between the 5. That if you optimize each of those and you get the balance right with each of those, you'll reach the goals that you want to get to for yourself over your life course. Okay, and that's the best way. It's the best way really I can use to describe that. The nutrition and hydration, clearly important in terms of your general health and well-being. It doesn't matter what illness you have, but particularly important for Parkinson's with regard to timing of meals and that. We might talk about some of that through some of the workshops. Exercise, clearly, you've seen the fun that's involved in it. That's the fun component in addition to the strengthening and the bone protection that's important with that. The one that catches people out that I see time and time again through the clinic is probably the emotional well-being element of these 5, and that's the one that as physicians we struggle most to help you deal with. I'll put my hand up with regard to that, but it's the one that can catch us all out. So what I'm going to encourage you towards the end is to, when you're looking at yourself with your Parkinson's, and if there's a dip, explore that one perhaps a little bit more thoroughly than you might some of the others. What I'm here to talk about today is medication awareness and support, and I'm going to try and do that over 20 minutes without mentioning a single drug name, so we'll see how we do. Simple question, fairly obvious answer. I ask it in the clinic fairly regularly. I always get a yes. Do you take your Parkinson's meds? All right, simple question, obvious answer, you'd think. Let's take a step back a bit and look at other simple questions and obvious answers that there might be. So not too many weeks ago, Scotland had a referendum as to whether or not they'd like independence. And I'd have put my hand up and said, yeah, sure they do, why wouldn't they? We did, they're Celts too, they've been talking about it for hundreds of years. I've seen Braveheart dozens of times. Surely to God, it's what they want. But they didn't. They backed away at the end. And if we draw a link between those two and people with Parkinson's disease, it's not quite 50-50, but about 1 in 5 people with Parkinson's take their regular medications only 20% of the time. Okay, so this is work that there's a weak Scottish link there, and that it's Donald Grossett's work, himself and his wife, Catherine, who were based up in Glasgow. They did this study in the first instance up in Scotland and published in the Movement Disorders Journal. And then again, they did a Europe-wide study looking at similar facets to whether or not people with Parkinson's actually take medication to help with their symptoms. And so 1 in 5 people who are going to come through to me on any given day, in the clinic in Vincent's, we had one yesterday afternoon, not using their medication perhaps as they should do. And the loser in that is usually yourself, okay? There's the waste side of things, clearly, with regard to medications, and possible side effects if you're not managing it, if you're not taking it in a routine kind of a way. But the most important down on that is that you're not going to get as much benefit from it as you should do. If you're going to try and profile who may underuse, the people we look at from the clinics mainly, probably a bit younger. What do I mean by that? Well, that's increasing every decade or every half decade in Ireland. It seems that we're accepting an older age for what old really means. I think that reflects me aging as well. So I'm in my 40s, so clearly I'm not middle-aged yet. That doesn't happen until at least I'm in my 50s. So you can't be old then until you're in your 70s or your 80s. And when I get there, it'll probably be older than that again. But younger people, less than 50, 55, if you have a low mood or depressive episode, if you're in the middle of that, trying to take your medication to get the benefit from them, it seems meaningless. If you're on a lot of pills, and what we see then is this cascade almost, where you're on medication, you're saying it's not working, and we give you more, rather than actually digging down into what the nitty-gritty of the problem is. And one of the simple nitty-gritties of the problem is the actual routine and the compliance with the pills itself. And then often as the regimen for medications gets more complicated, as Parkinson's disease progresses in you, it can be, trying to take all of the pills in the routine that's there can become a particular challenge. So that's roughly 1 in 5, but when they look at pill timing for everybody, so all of you out there with Parkinson's disease, there's likely to be days when you're good and days when you're not so good. And that will impact on how you feel with regard to your symptoms of Parkinson any single day. A couple of key take-home points. I'll refer back to these through the presentation. So we're talking about that fifth element within the 5, medical awareness and medical support. And I want you to back yourself. I mean, I think that's one of the key messages from today. Back yourself to be your own expert. You know your Parkinson's better than anybody. If you're in a relationship with, and there's a loved one there, well, then they're part of that. That back yourself is selves, if you like, for 2. But back yourself. You know it better than I do. You know better in yourself than I do. And I talk about this good patient, good doctor, and I'm going to show you a bit of a video on that in a few minutes on what I mean by that. But this is a win-win situation. And we'll have a bit of time to discuss that, and hopefully again through the workshop something that comes up. And then the last thing is that if you have a sudden deterioration in your Parkinson's disease, how do you fix it? Don't run to a change in your pill box immediately and a change or an upward titration in your Parkinson's meds in the first instance. We'll put some structure on how you might actually look to do that. And give you some insight on how we're trying to get the other doctors, again, GPs, doctors based in the hospitals, how we're trying to encourage them to think of those things too, instead of just if they see you, if you're poorly, pushing up the medication itself. So I think we have a video now, Malcolm, don't we? Which you might run. You might just before you do. So this is I'm going to show you a video of Trevor. Now Trevor doesn't have Parkinson's disease. He shot this when he was 16, about 2 years ago. He has another chronic illness for which there isn't a cure, and it's diabetes mellitus. And it's a deficiency disorder again. He doesn't get it. His cells don't produce enough insulin, so his treatment is based around insulin treatment. And it's a longish video. I've had to show 2 separate clips, but we've put them together for this. But the first bit of this that I want you to take on, register with, is the ownership Trevor has for his illness. And what he required to actually get that ownership included a desire to do it, understanding of what the illness meant, and then a pursuit of educating himself and using the education resources that were there. So there are common messages across all chronic illnesses, but particularly relevant to Parkinson's disease too. He'll talk somewhere in the middle of it then around the benefits to having Parkinson's disease, about diabetes being a good thing for him. And I think that mirrors across to Parkinson's disease too. Phinney talks about those little victories and every victory counting. I think the victories sometimes are all the more sweeter when you have to cross a greater adversity to actually do that. So there's a little bit of that. And then the last bit that we'll talk about in a few minutes' time comes down to relationship building, and that's been a very common theme through the morning session. But I don't mean relationship building amongst your, if you like, your established network of who you see as your community. I actually mean relationship building with your physician and your physician team. Okay? So we'll talk about that. Malcolm, if you would, please.
Hi, I'm Trevor Torres. I have eczema, asthma, I suffer from sleep deprivation, I'm allergic to nuts, but the fun one is juvenile diabetes, or type 1 diabetes. I was diagnosed with diabetes probably like 2 years ago, and I used to describe myself as a professional diabetic, except the problem with that is I haven't figured out a way to get paid yet. So until I do that, I like to call myself a diabetes evangelist, because I would recommend type 1 diabetes to anyone, and I'll get to that in a second. Just to describe a little bit with my situation, I pretty much do everything on my own. I track my own blood sugar, give myself my own shots, calculate my meals and insulin, and I've pretty much memorized the carbohydrate content of like every food in my house just because of how much I use it. So it's kind of a fun party trick, like, oh, hey Trevor, how many carbs are in like this soda? And I'm like, it's 42 for 1 can. And I would definitely recommend diabetes to everyone for 2 reasons, mainly, although there's a lot. I'm not going to list them all. One, it's so much easier to be healthier if you are a type 1 diabetic, because you're already looking at all the nutrition facts on your foods anyway. So I think that a lot of the diet problems people have is just because they kind of unconsciously eat something bad. They're like, oh, they look at their day or whatever, and they're like, oops, I probably shouldn't have eaten like that many cupcakes or something. And another thing I really like about diabetes, I feel like it makes me more confident. It's like, and this might be a little irrational, but it's like any accomplishment I have, I feel like is that much cooler because I have diabetes. So I accomplished this thing and I had diabetes at the same time. There's two main things. One, don't condescend. Especially for me, I don't really like that because I am one of the smarter patients, and so I guess I could have said stay out of my way, but that doesn't really help very much. When I was first diagnosed with diabetes, they were like, you can give yourself insulin in one of two ways. You can do it based on your blood sugar. If you have higher blood sugar, give yourself more insulin and so forth. Or you can do it based on what you're going to eat. If you're going to eat X amount, give yourself X amount of insulin. And I was just like, well, that doesn't make sense. Why don't I just come up with an algorithm that incorporates both variables? So again, that's probably a little atypical, but if they already have something figured out, you don't necessarily need to lower the level of your explanation down to what you perceive your patient's level to be. You can explain something, and then if your patient doesn't understand it, they can ask, for clarification. Now that may be just me, but I really hate it when I feel like I'm being talked down to, and that.
Quite a couple of number of points there, but I'm going to dwell at the moment just around the first things he was talking around, which was clearly he had an appetite and developed an understanding and educated himself and took on the ownership of his Parkinson's himself. And that's certainly one of my key points to yourself, is that you are your own expert with this. I might know more about Parkinson's disease per se, but I don't know more about Parkinson's disease than you. So that's what you bring to the table and what you have control over. Second question for you. What help do you need from your PD meds? And again, that's an individual question. So each of you are going to have different rationales for the medications you're on and different expectations with your own life. But it's a crucial question, and it really forms it's one of the pillars in terms of us as physicians trying to help you enjoy your life and get quality from your life. And what I've done here is I've put a photo up of Sam, and Sam was a wonderful man. He ran rings around me in the clinic, that's for sure. But he had Parkinson's disease, and he developed it in his late 90s. And Sam would come into clinic. I took over his care at the time. He was in his early 30s, I think. And he was still, he was born in that generation between the two wars, so adversity was kind of something he'd grown up with in terms of the economic depression and the fallout from the First World War and then into the Second World War, et cetera, et cetera. So, he had life experience that I certainly couldn't or wished to compete with. But he would come into the clinic, and he would invariably each year go back to the States. He had worked and emigrated out of Ireland and then back to Ireland. And he would go away to the States for perhaps 10 or 12 weeks of the year to see friends and acquaintances and some family that were still over there each year. And he would come into the clinic before going and say, right, Graham, what are we going to do here? And I'd say, well, how are things? And it would be, well, I'm off to the States now in a couple of weeks' time. And I said, well, what do you need to do when you're there? And for Sam, it was important for him. And Sam would book himself into the sheltered accommodation villages that are there. So he'd book himself into retirement villages as he went across the States over his 8 or 10 weeks, because he didn't want to be a burden on his friends. He didn't want to stop and visit. He wanted to have his independence and do it himself. So he would stop in the retirement village, and friends would come and visit him. They'd go out for a meal. But it was important for him that he would be up and dressed before the carers who might be there in the retirement village came in. That was important. He wanted to have that autonomy and independence. And then the second thing he wanted when he was over there was that he would be on in the evening time, so that when friends were coming and they were going out for a meal, he would be good then. And the rest of the day, he was happy to relax and not be too bothered by things. So they were his two very discrete goals well into his mid-80s on an annual basis. Look, I'm off to the States. I need to be good in the morning to get dressed, and I want to be good in the evening time when I want to meet friends that I cherish. And that was the photograph that you have there is a donation he gave to us in our clinic. He's a creative man, expressed here through some of the artwork he did. And he had drawn this, or he had painted this in '97, around the time he got his diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. And he entitles it "Casual of the Sea." And what you see in the foreground is a yacht. and in the distance then is a gathering storm. And that's how he perceived himself to be with his Parkinson's disease. But 15, 16 years later, he was still taking his annual trip across to the States and reaching the goals that he wanted to reach. So they were Sam's goals. I want you to think about some of your own goals and how the medicines can help you with it. So, you know, if you have your Parkinson's and you're still at work, well, then it's crucial that you still are participating in gainful employment from a financial perspective. So that's a very clear goal that we need to help you with. If you have a family that you have a responsible role in terms of caring for equally, well then you really need your medications optimized for that. But in modern Ireland now, it's the grannies and the granddads that do a lot of the child care as well, because both parents are away, so that role comes back to you. And it does in my family. My folks look after my 4 daughters on a Monday afternoon from school, and that's their job really until I come in. So there's a reward with it, but there's a demand on it too. So if you've got if the demands for the medications are around helping manage a family, well then let's identify those as really a goal that we need to work to. Or is it simply just the activities that you enjoy? And I think what we've heard from Claire and from Al and from Pat already is that engaging in an activity isn't necessarily about maintaining an excellence or a previous standard in that activity. That's fine for itself, but it's actually all the other rewards that you get from the activity too. So trying to maintain the activities that you engage in, and that's something that we try and push to. So just the selection, your own goals may be within that, they may be different, but that's what we try and encourage you to think about, okay? The second thing, this is the end of Trevor's video that we put together, but I mentioned at the start that I wanted to talk a little bit about relationship building, and that relationship building between you as a person with Parkinson's disease, living with it, and your family, and then the physician or the movement disorder service that's helping you optimize that. And that can be a 5, 10, 15, 20, 25-year course. So that relationship is important. And I've just highlighted that at the top as good patient. If you're informed as Trevor is and have a desire to maintain your own health and have an understanding of the 5 elements, you have goals or outcomes that you're really keen to achieve or to maintain or to explore as new ones, like the 8 or 9 participants in the last set dance who hadn't danced before. If you come into a clinic with that understanding and that knowledge and that empowerment, you will make the doctor in front of you a better doctor, because he'll be challenged by it. And by being a better doctor, he will help you with your own care better. But more importantly, he'll also, or as importantly, he'll help in understanding other people who've got Parkinson's disease and improve their care too. So it's a win-win situation for everybody with this. What do we do in the clinic then? So if we have that dynamic and it's present, as it is present with many of the people who come through to our service, we have a conversation. That's the clinic. We have a conversation. So usually it's open. What do we need to look at? What's worrying you now? What's the problem? What's been the change? Once we've identified that, what are the non-drug parts of the plan? So I had a young 30-something Pakistani gentleman in the clinic with me yesterday who was, he had to run for his bus to get to work, and he was finding he was late, and he was then turning up for work late. So he was looking for more medications first thing in the morning. He said, look, I get up at 7, I get the bus at 7:30. As I'm running for the bus at 7:20, the left leg is dragging, it's not as good as it was, what am I going to do? Can I have more medicine then? Is there something else that I need then? So I said, well, we took a step back then and said, well, when do you take your medications? And he was taking his medications at 7, having a breakfast at 7:10, 7:15, and running out the door. So what he needed was a change in the timing. He didn't need more medication at all. What are the other non-drug parts of the plan? So going back to the other 4 of the 5 elements and seeing whether there's something there that we need to work on. Once we've done that, and if there is a medication change, there's only medication change, I would guess, in around every second person who comes through. So usually, in at least 1 of 2, we're sorting whatever the problem is out without a change in medication. 1 and 2, yeah, there's going to be some kind of medication change. So we agree on the medication change, have a discussion around the common side effects that might be there, specific to that medication and specific to your own individual instances, okay? So is it one of the common ones like nausea or tummy upset? Is it dizziness because your blood pressure is low? Is it sleepiness and taking it out for some of the day that you don't need? Is it causing some confusion? So they're the kind of things that we have to explore. And then lastly, we have a contact plan, because regularly, Heather, who's the Parkinson's nurse with us in our service, will email me or ring me and say, that medication you made last week, it's not working, there's a problem. So we may not have scheduled a clinic appointment for a few months from now, but you need a contact plan that if there's something that's needed, that we do that. And that's the guts of it. It's very simple, but then I think sometimes a lot of the best plans are. Sudden deterioration in PD. So when you do go off, and why you go off, a lot of the time, again, isn't because your Parkinson's has progressed and you need more pills. Okay, some of the time it is, but it's not. And this is very nice work done by Brian McGuinness, who works alongside Tim Lynch in the Matter service. So he looked at the 2,500 phone calls that he took in 2009 from people with Parkinson's disease. And about 1 in 5 of them had to do with a sudden change. They were off, people were off. And when he drilled down into the cause, what he found were the things that hopefully most of you are beginning to identify as the common reasons for change in PD. Constipation, another illness or superimposed infection. Emotional disturbance, so stress. Is there an anniversary coming up? Is it a time of the year when you usually get upset or fretful about something? Is it just spontaneous? And then the other things there, dehydration, a change in different types of medication. So, is there new medications having been added in that are causing a problem? Some of the nausea medications do. Some of the medications that we use for confusion or depression do as well, okay? And then some of the other things there. So addressing these can help you with your Parkinson's before we even need to go and look at the medication change. And Brian has published a very nice single A4 page sponsored by Lundbeck, I think. And we have that, and he's disseminated that through all the hospitals around. And we have it, so it's an A4 page, and we stick it in the healthcare records of anybody who's got Parkinson's disease when they come in, so that the nurses and the doctors on the team will know that they have to look for these things, okay? It's the kind of conversation that you should see happening along with the Parkinson's nurse specialist that covers your area as well. And they're the kind of symptoms that they're likely to increase. So you'll recognize them all: the tremor getting worse, slowness in doing tasks or activities, being a little less confident in your walking or freezing, and then some of the other things: confusion, sleepiness, and visual hallucinations possibly creeping in. I want to briefly mention, due to time constraints, around some of the other individuals who are crucial around your strategy for managing your Parkinson's medication. And that's clearly your community pharmacist. And the kind of roles that we would see them having with that is education both of yourself and of your family. So if you're taking Parkinson's medication, that include laxatives for constipation, possibly an antidepressant, possibly something for sleep at night, if you've got bad dream sleep, as well as the physical treatments for your Parkinson's disease. It's important that both you and your family know what does what, so that they're educated up too. Performing a medication review with you to ensure that medications you're on for other conditions you might have aren't interacting, because sometimes we don't have that full list when you're in, and we don't know what's caused it. And that's particularly true after point 3. And I would encourage you, after any hospitalization that you have, to go and link in quite quickly after you're discharged with your Parkinson's nurse specialist and or with your pharmacist. So, because you're going to be washed out, you'll be malnourished from your hospital stay because the food isn't great. You'll have slept poorly because you're likely to have been in mixed accommodation or bayed accommodation. You'll have whatever illness was driving the problem too. So there'll be lots of reasons why you're going to feel poorly, and we need to help you get back to where you were as quickly as we can. Okay, so review after hospitalizations, ensuring that there's no interactions with medications that you've been put on recently or otherwise, and then the education role, which is crucial. So a couple of key take-home messages that I hope will resonate to some degree with you. Back yourself. You're your own expert. That dynamic between the physician and patient not only leads to better communication, it's a better relationship for all outcomes, in fact. Goal set yourself with regard to what you want yourself to achieve and what the medication role is in that, and try and establish a routine. We'll constantly ask you to do this routine around the timing of the medication you take, around your sleep, around your lifestyle and your nutrition in general. Know and act quickly against the 10 common causes for sudden change in Parkinson's, and if you're not sure, there's the helpline for there should be a Parkinson's nurse either through the Parkinson's Association and their helpline, or locally within your own service too, that can help with that. And then lastly, constant review of your medications, either through our service or through your pharmacist. Okay, so I hope there's something in all of that for everybody, and I hope that you feel up for some of the challenge, or that's part of the tone and the message of today. Thank you very much.